I understand we just had an election where neither Mr. Trump nor Mr. Biden nor Ms. Harris could say a word about what it means to be a declining empire. So you act out, that's advertising. You act out as if you were in a position to negotiate from a power of strength and redo the world economy. The United States is no longer in a position to make that happen.
The ship has sailed for globalism. Now, globalism is a very bad rap, but the ship has sailed. So if you're going to impose these types of draconian tariffs, and let's say you're Boeing, 60+% of the parts and equipment to make the airplane are coming from outside of the United States. And so it's unbelievably nonsensical to be doing what the president is doing.
The dominant bloc in the world economy is not the West. It is not the United States. And, I have a certain compassion. It's much easier to be on the upswing of an empire than to be there when it turns down. Every empire always has, no exceptions. I'm struck that the United States is now doing things which, for me, seem to be self-destructive on a scale that I find extreme.
Today, I'm talking to Professor Richard Wolff and Anthony Scaramucci. Richard Wolff is a professor of economics emeritus, University of Massachusetts Amherst. He's a visiting professor in the graduate program in international affairs at the New School University. He's also the co-founder of Democracy at Work and host of their weekly national radio and TV show called Economic Update. Anthony Scaramucci is a former communications director for the White House during President Trump's first term. He currently hosts the popular podcast The Rest Is Politics US, and he regularly features in international media. Anthony is also the founder and managing partner of Skybridge, a global investment firm which manages billions of dollars. So let's get started. Richard, I want to ask you, Trump announced a couple of months back Liberation Day, which was to put on tariffs on all the goods that are coming in, minimum 10% up to 50%. He gave two reasons why he's doing this, both of which are conflicting with each other. One's that he can negotiate a better trade deal, and two, he wanted to encourage companies to build factories in America. What did you make of all of this?
For me, this is mostly economic theater. It's the way politics works in the United States. We expect our leaders to give us an idea of how they're going to solve the problems. They are not given any credit for explaining to the American people what the actual problems are, what the difficulties with various solutions might be. Instead, they are driven by a kind of PR advertising mentality. Make what you're doing look as good as possible, hide the defects, hide the problems. For the United States at this point in its history, to attack literally every government in the world, every economy in the world, by suddenly announcing, not by discussions, not by meetings, not by conferences, that their problems and American problems might both be better solved if they rethought their relationship. No. Instead, you are going to be taxed. A tariff is the name of a tax. You are going to have every one of your products, goods and services shipped to the United States be suddenly confronted by having to charge a higher price in the United States because whoever buys the goods has to pay a tax to Uncle Sam called a tariff. You cannot do this in the United States if you're honest, especially if you're a Republican. Because if the Republican Party stands for anything in America, it stands for no taxes, lower taxes, fewer taxes, and Mr. Trump is raising taxes on Americans when he imposes a tariff. So you cannot be honest. You cannot say anything about it that's true. You have to make make-believe. And one example, very quick, is the make-believe that by a tariff, you're going to change the location decision of significant numbers of businesses. That's not going to happen. And for reasons that every business school that I know of, and I've taught in several of them, would teach the students. You don't know whether a tariff is going to be long-lasting or short-lasting. Mr. Trump has made it underscoringly clear that whatever a tariff is, you don't know if it's going to be there next week, let alone next year. What company is going to spend a fortune of money moving production, rechanging supply chains, and all of the rest of it on something as flimsy as one temporary government's decision, maybe to have the tariffs change, maybe not, maybe more, maybe not going to happen. And he has to tell that to the people, but he doesn't, because in America, it's about what you advertise your product does, not what it actually is.
What about his other point that he says he can negotiate better trade deals with those countries? Does that have any holding?
No, that's pandering to the notion that the United States is the the empire that we were in the second half of the 20th century. That's over. That's not true anymore. And I understand we just had an election where neither Mr. Trump nor Mr. Biden nor Ms. Harris could say a word about what it means to be a declining empire. So you act out, that's advertising. You act out as if you were in a position to negotiate from a power of strength and redo the world economy. The United States is no longer in a position to make that happen. This is a fool's errand, not going to work. And we've already seen, right up until the last few days, that the Chinese, for one, are not having any of it, and they are winning in this game. He's losing, but he will have a lot of PR to cover it over.
Anthony, what do you think of this?
Well, I mean, I was not, I'm going to be very candid with you guys, I wasn't expecting to agree with every syllable of what Professor Richard Wolff has said, right? Because I grew up as a capitalist and I grew up as a Austrian libertarian economist, and I'm fond of Professor Wolff's work. I followed him over the years because I think he's got a brilliant mind, and I certainly want to understand his point of view. So I agreed with every syllable of what he just said. So I would just want to add one thing and get the professor's reaction to it, if you guys don't mind. I think the thing I would like to add is that the ship has sailed for globalism. Now, globalism is a very bad rap, but the ship has sailed. So if you're going to impose these types of draconian tariffs, and let's say you're Boeing, 60+% of the parts and equipment to make the airplane are coming from outside of the United States. And so it's unbelievably nonsensical to be doing what the president is doing. And I'll just give another vivid example, and maybe the professor will agree with me. You have lobster fishermen that are trawling off the Maine coast. The processing plant is across the border on the other shore into Canada. It gets processed there, and then it gets sent back. So if you want to have a 25% tariff, you're going to knock the price of the processed lobster up 50% and price the lobster out of the restaurants and kill the entire fishing community in Maine. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do that. There's all of these little micro things that are happening at the same time where he's going to affect the economic behavior of everybody. And so again, that's equally nonsensical. And I guess the last thing I would say is that the professor is right that we're in decline on a relative basis. I don't actually think we need to be in decline on an absolute basis. If we had smarter, better politicians, and we had a better long-term game plan to handle the deficit and entitlement program spending and to right size the K through 12 public education system in the United States, I think we could be a great nation with great innovation and great technology, but we have to lift the living standards for the lower and middle income people. And so I'm not a Marxist, by the way, but I do believe one thing that I think the professor would agree with. I do believe in equal opportunity. I think the United States is a rich enough country where we have to have a platform of equal opportunity, which includes safety, it includes healthcare, it includes education, because I don't know about the two of you. I didn't pick my family. I didn't pick the location of my birth, or I didn't pick my sexuality, frankly, or even the sex that I happen to be. And I think it's unfair if you're born in certain parts of this country. I can tell you whether or not the kid is going to get a good education based on the zip code of where the kid is going to school. And I think that that's very unfair. And we can fix all of this, but it would require real leadership and not the stuff that we're seeing in Washington right now.
So, okay, is there a question to Richard? Or?
No, it's just an observation. I would like Richard to opine upon that observation. Maybe he agrees, maybe he disagrees.
Well, I remember liking some of the things I read about your, how shall I put it, separation from the White House and the back and forth. So I'm happy to say that I agree with most of what you said. I don't find that at all objectionable. It seems to me a reasoned and evidentially supported set of views. Let me add one or two, and maybe you can stimulate something in you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm struck that the United States is now doing things which, for me, seem to be self-destructive on a scale that I find extreme. I mean, we all do a little of that from time to time. I'm not asking for that never to happen. It happens. But here's an example, and I could give you several if you want. The best and the cheapest electric vehicles in the world right now are made in China. And there's a company there called the BYD Corporation, which makes them. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Paris, France, and they were all over the streets. I know, I studied them, but I mean, there they are. They're everywhere, but nowhere here. Nowhere in the United States will you see a BYD car. Why? The current tariff on BYD cars is 100%. Trump in his first presidency put on 25, 27%, or 25 on top of the 2.5 that were there before, and then Biden raised it to 100%. So this is a bipartisan effort to keep BYD, the best and cheapest electric car and truck you can buy, out of the hands of Americans, American consumers and American businesses. This is nuts. This is a crazy step. What are you doing? Let me explain. Every foreign competitor of every American company, a Nigerian firm, a French firm, an Italian firm, a Japanese firm, if it buys electric cars and trucks, will be and has already been buying BYD because it's the cheapest and it's the best. But their American competitor cannot do that. It's not available. A $30,000 electric vehicle from China will cost you $60,000 here in the United States because of the 100% tariff on top of it. So you're not going to buy that. You're going to buy a $40,000 or $50,000 electric vehicle from GM or Ford or Toyota or Tesla. You understand the logic here. So an American company is going to be at a competitive disadvantage being here. Why would a company located abroad that Mr. Trump says, come to America, you get to pay more for crappier inputs? That's not a good selling point. That will sell exactly nobody. And it will offset any other incentive you might have created. Why are you doing this? Well, for Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden, they were being tough against the Chinese. There's that delusion that you're still the empire. You're not being tough against the Chinese. If I were a Chinese politician, I'd be laughing. You are hurting yourself. You're helping us. We can sell BYD all over the world, and we will now have an extra selling point. You buy this car, you outcompete your American competitor because he can't get it. I mean, this is so dumb. And I don't think Mr. Trump is dumb, and I don't think the people around him are dumb. So when perfectly reasonable, smart people, many of whom had the same education I did, are doing these things, then you know there's something much more serious going on. People have lost their ability to see what's going on. Their ideological blinders and I know this as a person on the left. I have my colleagues on the left, and they have their ideological blinders. It's not a problem only of people on the right. I would never say that. But I am telling you that we are watching the United States under the leadership that Anthony quite rightly questions, making miscalculations one after the other. And let me give you a second example and I'll stop. Yesterday, the head of China, Xi Jinping, announced that the 53 countries in Africa will henceforth be able to export anything and everything to China, zero tariff. This happens in the same week that the United States reminds everyone that we have put 30, 40, and 50% tariffs against a whole host of African countries. I mean, this is grotesque. I did a little research and I discovered that China has been doing more business with Africa than the United States for the last 15 years. Isn't this something that needs a different approach than what we are doing? We are taking an entire continent and helping it move in a direction we say, politically and ideologically, we are opposed to or different from. This is a sign that we are in an economic and political system that is in very bad shape.
Yeah, Anthony, if you're able to react to that, but also to follow up on what Richard said, cross-party, it seems like Americans, politicians, are treating China as a complete adversary and will do whatever they can to downplay them, although Richard is saying it's actually backfiring. Do you think it's right that America are trying to treat China like an adversary? And I guess that's the question.
I don't fit into either party, unfortunately. So I was a lifelong Republican. I saw things a certain way. I felt we needed some muscularity to defense. I thought the most fiscally conservative person that I have met and I've observed in my 61 years on the planet was Bill Clinton. Now, maybe the professor will disagree with me, but he had the pay-as-you-go legislation from George Bush that he agreed to adhere to, and he passed a very large tax increase in March of 1993, and he ran a budget surplus, and he handed over the United States with a trajectory of a budget surplus of $5 billion, according to the CBO. So the debate between Gore and Bush 25 years ago was, we're going to have a $5 trillion surplus at the end of 2010. What are we doing with the surplus? Gore wanted to invest it in education, the environment, infrastructure. Bush wanted to return it to the taxpayer. Bush returned it to the taxpayer when he won, Bush versus Gore, and then a war started, and we went to war for the first time in U.S. history without a tax increase. The reason I'm bringing this up as a backdrop is that it's not just the incomprehensible decision-making of the Trump or Biden administrations. This has been going on for 25 years. And it's each successive story, we do worse. So you could have a monkey flipping coins behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, making better decisions than these guys have made. So to me, it's repairable. Maybe the professor disagrees with me on that. This is a very pliant, this is a very neurally plastic, resilient country. My life story probably can happen in other countries, but maybe not. My dad was a crane operator, and I went to more or less the same schools that Richard went to, and I was able to build 2 successful businesses and live a good part of the American dream. And so I'm bringing all this up because the decision-making that Professor Wolff is talking about, when you sit, I could break out into hives when I'm listening to the president talk about on-again, off-again tariffs. I can break out into hives knowing that the Chinese have a 50-year plan, knowing that the Chinese have a plan called Plan 2049, which is the anniversary of their revolution, and they have certain metrics that they're trying to hit in terms of the Silk Road, their investments in Africa, their investments across the Eurasian continent, the dual continent of Eurasia. They have a plan for their own infrastructure, their high-speed rails. They have a plan for the urbanization of their people in terms of moving them from the rural farmlands into the cities. And they are rational actors. Again, you may not like their system. There are people in the West that don't like their system. I'm not really here to opine about the system because I don't believe we should be imposing our system on people. We tried that with nation building in the Middle East. It cost us $7 billion. It cost us our standing in the global community, and it probably set back the Middle East a half of a century. So for me, I think it's very, very simple. There's a lot of blocking and tackling that the American government could do to restore itself. And I think the country is loaded up with immigrants. It's loaded up with risk takers. We've got great economic innovation going on in the country. We could heal ourselves. But if you want to kick black and brown people out of the country, and I don't know, I don't think it's a good idea. I think you're setting us up for an internecine battle where we're going to be fighting with each other in a way at a time where automation is coming, at a time when robotics are coming. McKinsey said yesterday, guys, 30% of the jobs in the U.S. in the next half decade may be lost to AI and robotics. And so what the hell are you guys doing? Why not have a comprehensive plan? Why not find a way to unify the red and blue states? I don't get it. So, I don't know. Maybe I should take hive medication, Professor. I don't know. It upsets me in a way because I do love this country. My father served in the U.S. Army. My uncles fought respectfully in the D-Day and the Normandy invasion 81 years ago, and at the Battle of the Bulge. And so I'm from a family of veterans. I'm from a family. My grandmother, I wish the two of you could have met her. She left her country at age 18, got here in 1923. She had an unconditional love affair with the country. She sent two of her sons to war in the Second World War and went to church every day praying for their safety. And so that's the family I come from. And to watch this happen in my country, Professor Wolff and I can disagree about the ideologies of capitalism, and we disagree about the ideologies of Marxism, but we're not going to disagree on presidential policy or the vision that the executive branch has had over the last 25 years. And the professor knows this, but it's worth restating. The Congress has ceded an extraordinary amount of power to the American president over the last 50 years. And so they've more or less abrogated their own powers. And so how is it surprising if you spend 50 years giving up your power to the president through executive action? How is it surprising now that there's a president on guard now that wants to exceed those ridiculous liberties that you've given the executive branch over the last 50 years?
I would only add that they have the nerve then to act surprised or shocked, that he's doing that. I'm an economist. The idea that the president could single-handedly impose tariffs on the whole world without any action by any other official is stupefying. What kind of a crazy idea is this? Along comes an unusual president, and you see what we are now seeing. The United States is becoming, as many polls already showing, if you ask people around the world, what's the scariest country in the world, they name us. We're the ones that are doing odd, strange, irrational things. They don't understand. There was once an alliance between the United States and Western Europe. That seems to be disappearing also. All the major politicians of Europe over the last 75 years have made their careers by being pro-American. If you are understood not to be pro-American as the next one, your career suffered. More or less, it suffered. So Europe is led by people, all of whom are super vetted to be pro-American. Mr. Starmer in England, Mr. Macron in France, Mr. Merz in Germany, and you could go on. But they remind me now of the cartoon that Anthony and I both saw as young people. There's this character running off the edge of the cliff, and he's now several feet beyond the edge of the cliff, looks down and realizes that the cliff isn't there anymore. He's run off the edge, and as he realizes, looking down, that there's no cliff, he falls and the story is over. The Europeans are the clown. They're running off the end of the cliff. They're looking down. Mr. Trump has gone somewhere else, and they're left to fight a war they cannot win and impose on their people a level of denial of social programs, which Europeans, having enjoyed much better ones than we have here for decades, are not about to give up. You're looking at the United States with a shrinking number of allies as its adversary grows. And here's a statistic that ought to be inscribed in every economics curriculum. If you add up the GDP of the group of seven, the United States, Japan, Canada, Britain, France, Italy, and Germany, the big, old, Western economic powerhouse, it comes to about 28-29% of total global output. If you do the same calculation, you add up the GDP of China and its BRICS allies, it's 35% of world output. The dominant bloc in the world economy is not the West. It is not the United States. Every country in Asia, Africa, Latin America with a project they would like help on, or export markets they'd like to be expanded, etc., etc. They still send missions to Moscow, to London, and to New York, and all of that. But as soon as the mission is done there, they go to New Delhi, or they go to, China, they go to Sao Paulo, and they can get a better deal there, and they're making those deals. And the Americans keep thinking that's evil act. It's not evil action. It's the logic of an economic development that the United States either unwilling or unable to deal with. I agree with Anthony. I think the potential of this country is enormous, has been, is still. But I am watching all of that eroding, disappearing, and I would love to, I don't want to dictate your topic, obviously, but this spectacle of deporting large numbers of people who've been working here for years and paying their taxes, and what are we doing? The country became great because it could absorb immigrants. It could find ways to give them a decent home, a decent job, income, and then get their contribution to the production. When we deport, we show we're an economy that can't do that anymore. That's what we show. The rest is advertising, and that is not serious.
Before we go to Anthony, I want to just ask you, I think we agree on the problem. What would you say is the solution? Would you want America to act more like India, where they're involved in BRICS, one of the members, but they're also going to, let's say, the next summit in the G7, where they're more neutral on topics? Is that what you think America should do? Or what's the solution for them to get back?
Well, let me start. Here where Anthony and I may disagree. Right? For me, I've been an economics professor all my adult life. I was born in Youngstown, Ohio. My father was working in the Youngstown sheet and tube factory, pushing a wheelbarrow, and all the rest. I can assure you that if there's any conclusion I've spent a lifetime arriving at, I didn't start with this, it's the conclusion that the problems of the American economy are much deeper than what I was taught to look at. And it took me a long time to figure it out, and here's what I would say very simply. We have to deal with a question that we have been afraid, and that's the word I use advisedly, afraid to ask. We have a particular system, a way of organizing enterprise, factory, office, store, doesn't matter. And that's with a relatively small number of people at the top, the owner, the inventor, the partners who started it, or if you're a corporation, the board of directors at the top. They make all the crucial economic decisions: what to produce, what technology to use, where to carry out the production, and what to do with the net revenue that this enterprise generates. The vast majority of the people at every workplace are employees, and they are systematically excluded from making those decisions. If the people making them are accountable, they're accountable to the shareholders, who are not the people working there. That's a completely different group. This dichotomy creates a level of tension, difference, conflict, and bitterness, and envy, and a whole lot of other things. That set of problems is the root cause of the difficulties. And the way out is to have an honest discussion. That's all people like me ask for. An honest discussion. Is this received traditional way of organizing an enterprise the best way? A necessary way? Something every enterprise has to demonstrate? Or might there be, and I'm going to use these words provocatively on purpose, might there be an argument for a democratization of the enterprise? We make the political authorities accountable to us, at least as voters, but we make the authorities in the business world unaccountable to those over whom their decisions exert enormous influence, namely the employees. Why are the employees not given the same democratic position in their enterprise that they get in the community where they reside, vis-a-vis the mayor or the senator or the president, for that matter? I think we can be proud as Americans. We question our education system. We question our medical system. We question the institution of marriage. We're extraordinary in the questions we dare to ask. But when it comes to economics, we are not exemplary in what we dare to ask. We are like sheep with a taboo, and you never go there, and you simply assume that what we got is what is necessary and also the best thing since sliced bread.
Anthony, do you agree that the start is having that conversation about democratization of organizations?
Yeah, I mean, yes, in theory I do agree with it, but I think the problem is that the professor and I both know we don't live in a normative society, so it's just not going to happen. They're not going to allow that to happen. They'll push back for their own personal self-interested reasons. I would say this to both of you. There are 27 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. When the Constitution was framed in 1789, what was the framing? What was the idea behind the framing? That there would be successive amendments to the Constitution. They started with the Bill of Rights, 10 amendments. You have a 230-year period of time, 36-year period of time since 1789. You've had 27 amendments. You've had one amendment roughly every 8 to 9 years. Yet, you haven't had any amendments. The 27th Amendment was in 1993. The 26th Amendment, the Civil Rights Voting Act, was 59 years ago now, guys. That was 1965. And so the document was set up so that it would be a living, eternal document and give the opportunity to renew the social contract over time. These sons of bitches in Washington won't do it. But here are two amendments that I think we desperately need to begin the process of reform. Amendment number 1 would be to end gerrymandering. This is absolutely preposterous that the candidates are picking the voters. The voters are supposed to pick the candidates. And so you could do it through AI, you could do it through demography. You've got to get the congressional districts, there's 435 of them, to look like the geometric shapes that we could recognize from 9th grade geometry. They look like these jagged edge jigsaw puzzles now, and they're completely nonsensical, and it's unfair to the American people because they're being chosen by the representatives, not vice versa. Number 2, we have to end Citizens United. And just for your international viewers, in January of 2010, Justice Scalia said that it was okay to spend unlimited amounts of money in U.S. politics. That was your First Amendment right. You could unleash a torrent of billions of dollars into your ideas. He set it up so that it would be a political action committee, but it's a bunch of nonsense. These things were coincident to the campaigns. Billions of dollars have come in. And I don't have charts with me, guys, but I just want you to imagine the legislative agenda from 2010 to today has been skewed to big business, big pharma, corporate welfare, kleptocracy, you pick it, but none of it has been related to the lower or middle income people, which is why they're very angry. You know, Professor Wolff mentioned growing up in Youngstown, Ohio. I visited with Donald Trump when I was on the campaign with him twice, Youngstown, Ohio. And believe it or not, in my ill-fated stint in the White House, I flew Air Force One with Donald Trump to Youngstown, Ohio, where we did a big event in their civic center. And listen, you know, Richard knows this. I know this. The town got hollowed out by globalization, and the town got hollowed out by the absence of elites and establishment people from focusing on the right policies for lower and middle income people. And these people gravitated to an angry populace who's not serving their interests, who's offering tax cuts to his wealthy friends, a very hard to understand Byzantine tariff. He's coming down from Mount Evil like the orange Moses with this tablet, okay, of tariffs. We don't even know what the hell it is, and we don't even know how he derived the numbers, you know? So to me, start with reforming the government and forcing these people back into the original ideas in the Constitution and the duopoly, this monopolistic duopoly that these people have. And then you can get closer to what Richard wants. I don't think you're ever going to get to what Richard wants because these people are schemers, guys. You know that.
Richard, I'd like for you to respond, but just quickly. So I'm from Britain. The show has a mainly American audience, but I'm from Britain. And the amount of money you spend on a campaign now, ask the mayor how much he spends. I think it's something like $50,000 to run a political campaign. In America, you'd laugh at that. You know, you spend on campaigns to run for president billions of dollars.
Okay, what do you think the mayor's race is going to cost?
Where in New York?
In New York, yeah.
I'm going to guess to make 50 million.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy. Richard, I'll pass it over to you.
Let me respond. I sign up for both of the reforms Anthony just meant. I agree with him. They are very good. They are very vital. I would support them with enthusiasm, publicly, privately, in every way I know how. But here's what I would say. Even if we struggled successfully and we built a campaign that succeeded in getting those two reforms, including even as amendments to the U.S. Constitution, the people he knows are against all of this, just like I do. They are going to fight us every step of the way to prevent those reforms. We know that because they've been doing that already. And they're not going to stop just because we win. They're going to go to work to undo what it is we will have achieved if we get it. Look, when my students ask me to say, what is your overview to the last 75 years of American economic history? Here's my answer. American economic history in the last 75 years has been a concerted and largely successful effort to undo the New Deal. That's what we have. Because at the end of the New Deal, the business the GOP, the business community, they got together and they had seen in the 1930s something they never wanted to see again. A president who did exactly what Anthony said, who responded to the people in the middle and the bottom by creating Social Security, unemployment compensation, the first minimum wage, and the first government jobs program for 15 million unemployed people, and transformed the economy by doing it. And who paid for it? The rich. Tax rates went way, way up, and what they didn't get from the rich in taxes, they got from them by borrowing. But the important thing was they used it for the mass of people, for all of that education and infrastructure and all the things that Anthony rightly put out. Those people will undo what we do unless those people are not in the position to have and to use the profits of enterprise. And to take that away from them requires the democratization of the enterprise that I'm talking about. I know what Anthony means, that what I'm talking about is far out. I get that. I'm not blind. I live in the same country.
I like it, Rich. It's not like I...
No.
I like that. If you told me I could press buttons and boom, that would happen, I'd be like, that should happen.
No, you made that clear. I understand that. But I understand also that in a peculiar way, I am more realistic because I can see what has to be done. Granted, it's far-fetched in terms of what we can do now. But if we don't do that, we are going to be spinning our wheels, getting those reforms, if we're wildly lucky, only to see them undone by the constantly existing organization of enterprise, which generates the people and the incentives and the resources to realize their incentives to have the country look like it does now, rather than the way it did in the Great New Deal.
So, how would you recommend? Like Anthony says, it's just very far out. How would you recommend getting to such a place?
Well, I was going to give myself as an example. Okay, I make the kinds of criticisms that I make. I've done that all my life. But in the last 10 or 15 years, the level of self-questioning here in the United States, while it is still far from what it could and should be, has been something I had never seen before in my life. So I now have an audience. People talking like me have audience in this country we have never seen before. And it's a very heady experience, I gotta tell you. I walk down the street, people come over to me, say hello, want to talk to me because they've seen this or that interview or a book or whatever I've done. That is a change. I've never seen that before in this country. And as I say, I've lived and worked here all my life. So I'm very hopeful. I think that the problems of the United States are deep enough, have to do with the loss of its empire. And, I have a certain compassion. It's much easier to be on the upswing of an empire than to be there when it turns down. Every empire always has. No exceptions. Eli, you come from a country still not quite aware that it's lost its empire, right? So you're further along than we are. We kicked you down the road in order to replace you. And it's very hard for us as a nation to confront that empire is now over. And so... But it cuts two ways. It's very hard. It's lots of denial going on. But underneath that, those Americans who are smart enough and daring enough, and we have quite a few of those, are willing to start asking questions. And that's all Anthony really wants, is that people will listen to the questions he raises and take them seriously.
And begin a process of reform.
That's exactly what I want. Exactly.
Okay, great. So I think we've got to talk about the recent news, which is Donald Trump and Elon Musk's fight against each other. So just to give some context for people who are listening, Elon Musk ran Doge's Department of Government Efficiency, which was supposed to cut waste and fraud in government. Elon spent several months on it. He got very emotionally involved in it. His companies went down, not down, but they got hurt because of it, so he got very emotionally involved in it. Whilst he was doing that, Trump introduced the big beautiful bill, as he calls it, to extend the debt ceiling 2.4 trillion over the next 10 years, 240 billion extra every year for the next 10 years. Elon got very upset, and they ended up getting into a fight. Trump threatened to stop giving money to his companies. Elon said he was on the Epstein list, and now they've started making amends. Anthony, I mean, you've got you knew Trump. I don't know if you know him still, but you knew Trump. Was this always going to happen? Was a fight always going to happen? What's the future for Elon in politics?
Listen, I think the fight was always going to happen. I don't think you unknow somebody. I haven't talked to Trump in about 5 years, but I don't think you unknow somebody. I knew Trump for 20 years. I did 71 campaign stops with him in 2016, argued with him in most situations, hundreds of hours of media advocacy for him in his first presidential run, and I raised him millions of dollars and gave over $1 million to him personally. So I think I know him. I think I have enough gravitas there. I'm not his friend. I don't think anybody is his friend. Anybody that says to you they're friends with Donald Trump doesn't understand the relationship. He would run you over with the car the minute that he didn't need you. So someone tells you they're friends with Donald Trump, or Elon said he loved Donald Trump as much as a straight man can love another man. I'm not saying that. Elon said that, and he said it on X. And I think what ends up happening with people, they get disillusioned because Trump is a narcissist that knows how to love bomb people. Okay, he'll love bomb you for the first 90 days, and then you're a token in his wallet, if you will, and then he gets bored of you and he kicks you to the curb. That's Donald Trump. Donald Trump's the type of guy that if he played golf with Richard Wolff for 40 years and Richard dropped dead of a heart attack, God forbid, at the halfway house at the 9th hole, Trump would be like, Eli, who the hell was that guy? And who's going to help me finish this round? That is Donald Trump. Okay, so I said on my podcast that relationship, once they entered the White House, would not last 6 months. It lasted exactly 12 Scaramucci's. Okay, it's actually 11.8. It's 130 days. But I round up because I want to be generous to Elon. But that relationship is now over. He said he was on the Epstein files. He's put it out to 220 million X followers. He's not gonna, Trump, there's no going back. Okay, when you leave Trump's orbit, you can re-enter, but you're entering at a further out orbit. If you're starting out at Mercury, you're probably out by Uranus, and I love that word, so we'll use Uranus. You're probably out by there, okay, if you come back in. Steve Bannon is back in the orbit, but he's further out. He's like at Pluto. You see what I'm saying? So, Musk will try to create a cold peace with him. But I do think Musk is an interesting character because he's 53, 52. He's a young man with hundreds of billions of dollars. And if he wants to create a third-party movement in the country, as hard as it is to do because this duopoly has got the thing really blocked up and crossed procedurally, but if he wants to create a third party in the country, he has the wherewithal, he has friends like Larry Ellison that can help him do it. And I think the American people are done with these two parties. They hate these two parties. 41% of the registered Americans now are independent. And so these parties have lost the plot, and they are focused on corporate fat cats, and they're focused on corporate welfare and tax cuts. That's what they're focused on, both parties. And that's been the case in Citizen United.
Okay. Richard, what do you think of, and also talking about what Elon was actually doing in government, what did you think of Doge?
Well, I don't have any personal connection with neither Mr. Musk nor Mr. Trump, so I can't speak based on any indirect or intimate or firsthand kind of knowledge. So I'm looking at all of this from a distance. In my judgment, Mr. Musk rescued Mr. Trump, got in the election by giving him $200 to $300 million, which at least is the sum I see more often than any other sum that he did. And that, of course, is an extraordinary gift. Very, very few people could or would do such a thing. So he establishes himself immediately as the number one patron of the political life. I agree with Anthony. The two parties are constantly pandering to the same small group of super rich people for these kinds of donations. That's exactly true. And Mr. Musk, being the richest one of them, is in a remarkable position to play around in politics to whatever extent he finds it amusing. I think this is disgusting. I think it makes a joke, and another good one, about democracy. Every time I hear a leader in our country talk about preserving democracy, I keep wondering, what exactly are you talking about? You know, you yourself are a creature of the absence of that kind of democracy. So I don't have much hope. If Mr. Musk funds a party, I'm assuming it'll be a party that's even more his spokesman than Trump was able or willing to be. And I don't see that as solving any problem. There's nothing that Mr. Musk has ever said that suggests to me that he understands the problem. Even when he talks about the need to deal with the growing national debt, the deficit problem, which in my judgment is a serious problem. And I think, a few weeks ago, the Japanese, by their unwillingness to buy the bonds, were letting people know just how far and wide and deep the anxiety is about endlessly funding this American bottomless pit of national debt. And I'm acutely aware of how that has financed our import surplus. It has financed our economy. And, I think Anthony said it a little bit earlier. We don't fight wars since Vietnam. We don't fight wars with taxing our people because they wouldn't support it. You have to do it by borrowing, to have the illusion that somehow you're fighting the war without it costing people, which of course it does. It's just you spread it out. And now we can't do it anymore. Our national debts, the interest on it this year is very close to the defense budget, and will be larger than the defense budget within a year or two if the big beautiful bill goes through. At some point, as everybody who's ever studied this material knows, the mass of people will get it into their heads, hopefully we'll help them, that you're not being given the schooling or the health care or the rest that you want because the government is taking our taxes and giving it to the rich people who lent to the government. That's not a sustainable political arrangement. Governments go when they're in that position. Anyway, my hope is that this stuff becomes more and more glaringly apparent, and that Mr. Trump, Mr. Musk, or anybody else who enters the scene will be pressured by the flow of events to stop the advertising, play acting, and start dealing one way or another with the actual. Meanwhile, my job is to explain as much as I can to whoever I can get to listen what's going on here, because frankly, I don't know what else to do. Although if there's more horror shows like the one in Los Angeles, then you'll find me on the street also.
I guess you mentioned two problems there. One is the amount of money, again, you mentioned again, which is a huge problem in America, the amount of money that's in US politics. And number two, the amount of debt that America has, that China holds of America. How, in terms of debt, what can Trump do except for raising the debt ceiling? Is there anything else he can do?
Yeah, look, the tariffs are in part an idea of raising some more money. I mean, the problem isn't difficult. If you have a deficit, you either have to get more revenue or do less spending. This is not difficult. Since we've spent the last 75 years shifting the burden of taxes off of corporations and the rich and back onto the mass of people. I mean, if I had time, I would take you through the level of taxation of the 1960s or 70s, which is not exactly ancient history. But the tax on corporations then was double to triple what it is now. And that was a time of faster economic growth than we now enjoy. So the notion that somehow taxing the corporations is a trip into a bad situation, it's exactly the opposite. Right? I could explain that. I have all the statistics you want, not a problem. It's very easy to show. They don't want to cut. The Democrats make sure you can't cut the spending because there'll be trouble in the street. Okay, so how can you do it? Well, Mr. Trump is going to try tariffs. That causes all kinds of other problems that he didn't think through when he did it, because he could do the tariffs because of the very ceding of authority that the Congress gave him that right, which they did. so he could do these tariffs. He could raise a bit more money, enough to solve this problem? Not at all. That's why the big, beautiful tax is such a disappointment. You can't get very much revenue. You dare not tax corporations and the rich, because that's your donor base. You can't tax the mass of people because they are already enraged, and that will kill your future. So you can only borrow. So who do you borrow from? Corporations and the rich. And what is it you borrow from them? The taxes you didn't make them pay, which they give to the government as a loan. This is the crookedest business I can imagine. Our national debt is a gift to the corporations and the rich. And they have the power to keep it that way. And that's what they're doing. And they're doing it despite Mr. Trump's theater and spinning and all the rest, which is why we have trillions of deficit after all the hoopla. And that's what the Hakeem Jeffries and Johnson in the House and all those people, that's what they're strong-arming everybody to support, even the people whose career has been yowling against that, Rand Paul or the others. It's just a pathetic spectacle of a government that cannot get itself out of a paper bag that is suffocating it.
Anthony, would you think that's the right thing and right way to deal with the debt? To put high taxes on corporations like yours, like Skybridge, or people, rich people?
I would go back to the Clinton marginal tax rates, and I'd go back to the Clinton marginal corporate tax rates, which are higher than the current rates, and I would reimpose the pay-as-you-go legislation, which would prevent the out-of-control spending, but would also block Republicans from trying to give out too many tax favors. And so I maintain that you don't have to be as draconian as that, because we do have a dynamic country. We have a dynamic potential to grow the economy through the robotics, through the biotech, through all the great innovation that's coming. And so I would just go back to the March 1993 taxes. They're higher. And I would go back to the March 93 corporate taxes, and I would implement, again, you couldn't get it done because these guys would never let you do it, but I would implement the pay-as-you-go legislation. It would take about 15 years, but you would slow down the growth of the government relative to the growth of the economy. You guys both know this. We don't ever pay back our debts. We never paid back the Second World War II debts, but we can make them manageable by growing the economy faster than the growth of the debt. And so when you have debt at 120, 130 of the GDP, it's going to end up becoming very unhealthy. Last time we had that, and the professor knows this, was during the Second World War. I think we were at like 95 to 100% of our GDP. We brought it down through growth. We brought it down through the taxation that the professor is mentioning. And so I would be more in a mama bear position than where Professor Wolff is, but it's doable, but it would require honesty from the public servant. We'd have to say, listen, I'm sorry, we are over-promising and we're under-taxing. And by the way, just so you know, deficit spending is unfunded tax liability. So we're going to pay it. We're either going to pay it through inflation, which is a very regressive tax. We're going to monetize the debt by weakening your purchasing power, or we're going to be honest with you and actually tax you at appropriate marginal rates. You're going to pay it. You're going to pay the piper one way or another, because deficit spending is unfunded tax liability. But guys, I do have to apologize because I have a 3:00, and we've gone for an hour. And I apologize. I got somebody waiting for me, but I've greatly enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you so much, and Richard. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on too.
Yes, and I appreciate very much your invitation. I've learned a bit more about Anthony, and I am struck by how much we see. I hope he gets his reforms